Hello there, and welcome to the English Language Club. This is our weekly live stream, so thank you very much for joining us. We've got a few people watching. 10p has said hi, and Kamis, and Shaheen. Now, Shaheen, we've got a question from you on the Discord, and we're going to start with that.
Oh, excellent.
But yes, if you are joining us for the first time, you're very welcome. And yeah, we haven't got any questions on the YouTube chat yet or on Facebook. So if you are watching there, please say hi anyway if you haven't already. And if you have any questions, get them coming in, because at the moment we've only got the one question. But yeah, we're moving towards this idea of getting questions coming in before the live stream on Discord. This is what Shaheen has done earlier this week. And lots of people have joined the Discord, which is great. We've got Arafat and Manoprio, Dam Lasural and Ferreira and ATB, all very new sign-ups to Discord. So
very welcome.
Yeah, it'd be great if you're not on Discord and you want to ask a question, head on over to there. We'll do more things on Discord in the future. So let's see. So as I said, Shaheen had a question on Discord. Yes. We're going to start with that, which was, how do we know whether it's an adverb or preposition after the verb in a phrasal verb? For example, put off. Now, I guess this is, in one way, is a very simple answer, but in another way, I can understand why people are getting confused by this, because phrasal verbs are one of the most complicated things, and so are prepositions. It's difficult to understand even for native speakers. So, Tony, what do you think about this question?
So, it's an interesting question. First of all, because phrasal verbs obviously can have an adverb or a preposition, and they work differently. There are some rules that are usually true when it's a phrasal verb with an adverb, and other things that are usually true when it's a phrasal verb with a preposition. That said, if the question is, how can you tell whether it's an adverb or a preposition? The answer is kind of, well, those are just two different lists of words, right? If the word is a recognizable preposition, then it's a preposition. If it's a word that you know is an adverb, then it's an adverb. But the problem with that is that many words are both. Off, for example, can be both an adverb, which means kind of away from or something like that, or a preposition, where it means like some distance from. So you could talk about something being offshore or off the shore, means it's some distance from the shore. It's not super close, but it's not super far away either. But off as an adverb, like he shook off a snake or something that was biting his arm or something like that. Or
to put off a meeting, to delay.
Right. Yeah. So off can be an adverb or an adjective. So in that case, it's just not really. It's just not really like you can't really tell, right? Whether put off, is that meant to be a preposition phrasal verb or an adverb phrasal verb? Well, it could be either. So you have to kind of treat it as either.
Yeah.
Yeah. And,
at the end of the day, what we're all trying to do is improve our English so that we can express ourselves and be understood. And like I said, most native speakers, they don't really know anything about phrasal verbs or prepositions or anything like that. They just know what the words mean and how to use them. So that's ultimately what we want to do. We don't need to be able to classify, is this a phrasal verb or a phrasal adverb? So, yeah, I think, like you said, it's just, look at the type of word, but it's more important to know the meaning, right?
Yes, exactly. The biggest reason to think about the differences are that, for example, phrasal verbs with an adverb, if you're using a preposition, you put if you're using a pronoun, you put the pronoun between the verb and the adverb. So you wouldn't say we're going to put off, if you're going to say we're going to put off the meeting, But if you use a pronoun, you'd say we're going to put it off, right? And so that
say we're going to put the meeting off, right?
Right, but if you're going, exactly. But if you're using a pronoun, you have to put it in the middle.
Oh yeah.
Right,
Yeah,
you're going to put off. It off. Yeah, we wouldn't say we put off it, right? But you can say we can put the meeting off, or we put off the meeting. That's because off is being used here as an adverb, right? Now, the only way I can tell that off is being used as an adverb is because put it off makes sense, but put off it doesn't make sense. Whereas with a preposition, you put if there's a pronoun, you put it after the whole phrasal verb. What would be an example of one with a preposition? A phrasal verb with a preposition. Something like
take off.
Well, take off. No, those are adverbs. Look at. Look at something. You would say you look at it. I don't know if look at is a phrasal verb or if it's just the preposition, but either way, you can't say look it at. You look at it, right? So the question of like whether it's something that goes with a phrasal verb is an adverb or a preposition, the only way it's helpful is it's going to help you know what's going to sound more natural. But the reality is, what you don't need to, if you don't immediately recognize the word as an adverb, like, that's, let's see, over or under. No, not over or under. Up or down are adverbs usually. So up or down, you like, okay, get up. And that makes sense. That's an adverb. I know that I can put a pronoun or something between the verb and the adverb. But if it's a preposition, like after, like run after, you can't say run it after. You say I'm running after it, right? So, but if you don't immediately recognize the word as either an adverb or a preposition, then it's not really helping you, right? Yeah. So don't worry about it, because it's not, either way, that's not going to help you know what's going to sound natural to a native speaker.
Yeah, so I guess people have kind of codified when you can split a phrasal verb, when you can say it or it, and yes,
there's more than one rule.
Yeah, exactly, but it's one of those things where I think the rules are no longer don't stop being that helpful, because the rules can get very, very complicated, and there's so many exceptions. And it's, I think, easier just to do what we do as native speakers, which is just sort of tune into what feels right.
And listen to what other people say. Eventually, your brain will learn which words go together, right? Colocations are just huge in English. Just which words go together and which words don't. So you'll eventually get the impression that, put it off sounds okay, but put off it doesn't sound okay, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, phrasal verbs. There's too many of them.
Well, for example, this is a good example. If looking at a different meaning, this is why phrasal verbs are so complicated and difficult to learn, is because they have different meanings.
Yes.
So put off can mean to delay something, but it can also mean to stop liking something. I used to like fish, but I was put off when I went fishing.
Right. So
then you
put me off
say,
fishing. Yeah.
Yeah.
It put me off
me
fishing.
Off it. Yeah. And so in that case, you can say, in that different meaning, you can say put off. I was put off it.
Exactly. It put me off, and that is exactly true. And so words
it's complicated.
Yeah. Words that kind of fit both, like they could be an adverb or a preposition. It really just depends on the meaning. Right. But the reality is, like what Colin is saying, it really just always depends on the meaning. There isn't really a situation where these rules. So basically what I'm saying is, if you immediately say, oh, hey, I recognize that word as a preposition or as an adverb, then that's great. Use that rule to your advantage to make that easier for you. But if you're having to struggle to figure out, then this rule is no longer helping you make it. It's no longer helping make it easier. So don't worry about it. Yeah. So let us know, Shaheen, if that answers your question, or if you have any other questions related to phrasal verbs or anything else.
Yeah, I feel like we could talk about either phrasal verbs or prepositions for a whole hour easily. It is complicated.
Yeah.
But like I said, I feel like people would do better to try just learn this subconsciously rather than just through practice, listening, rather than trying to understand the rules, because the rules are inconsistent and complicated, and there's so many exceptions. So yeah. Okay, let's move on then. Where do we get to? We had a topic here. 10p says, change the topic. What do you think about the final match of Euro 2020? Well, a lot of people won't know what we're talking about because Tony's in Canada and there's people all over the world. But
I think people all over the world know what the Euro is.
Do they? Okay.
Yeah, I think so.
But then on the same day, there was also the final of the Copa Americas.
That's true.
Argentina beat Brazil. What do I think? But to be honest, I don't think a lot about football. It's not something I'm a huge fan of. Yeah, it was a shame. It was exciting, I suppose. Anyway, enough of that. So here's a question from Matt Lindell. This is an interesting question. Is it rude to use the word bloody in British English? It's kind of like the F word in American English, isn't it? Well, not really. It's not as
so. Why don't you answer the first part of the?
Well, we've got. I think we've got some delays. Yeah, I'll carry on speaking. I think we've lost Tony there. So, yeah, it's not as it's definitely not as strong as the F word, but yeah, it really depends on how you use it and how your tone and things like that. I think we've got Tony back. Here we are. Hey, Tony, we lost you.
Sorry about that. Yeah,
it's okay. So
I was here the whole time. Sorry.
I was just saying, yes, the word bloody, it's not as strong as the F word, and it kind of depends on how you use it to an extent. It's a lot of it depends on your intonation and sort of what emotion you have behind it, I think. But it is, I would say, probably try not to use it if you're in any doubt, because you could offend somebody accidentally.
That's a good rule for profanity or vulgar language. Like if it's not your first language, avoid using bad language in your second language, because you might not know when it's appropriate, even if you know what it means. It's funny because a lot of times when people are learning a language, the first thing they want to know is how to swear. But the reality is swearing in another language is very difficult. And you really have to understand not just the language, but the culture in order to swear appropriately. So usually it's a good idea to avoid it. Now, in American English, this one's a little bit funny. First of all, I would not 100% agree that it's kind of like the F word. I would say it's nowhere near that serious. But the thing about it is, it's just not something that Americans say. It's very, very uncommon to use bloody as swearing in the United States. And so when the Harry Potter movies came out, they used this term quite a lot. It must have been, it either is or was common teenager slang or swearing back when those movies came out. But this really threw a lot of Americans because they were not used to hearing it. And it sounded more serious than something that they would hear just because people weren't used to hearing it. So they kind of assumed that it was more strong. So it really isn't that strong a swear word in the US or in American English, but it is just incredibly uncommon. So no one ever uses it really.
Yeah. Okay. Great question, Matt. Thank you for that. So we've got a few more questions. Azizi, Zahira, and Win have posted questions. So Azizi on Facebook says, hello, what's the topic? Are you talking about phrasal verbs or prepositions? We started off with that. With these live streams, we don't start with a topic. what we're doing nowadays is we have a Discord channel. You'll find a link in the description below where we take questions during the week. And we started off with a question about prepositions and phrasal verbs. And then we just go on to questions that we receive during the live stream. So if you have a question, please put it in the chat right now, and we'll talk about it in a minute. Thank you, Aziz, for that, and thank you for watching on Facebook. If anyone else is on Facebook, please say hi, and if you have just joined us, also say hi.
Let us know where you're watching from.
Yeah. Now, Zahira, we've had a few questions from Zahira in the past. Okay. So, hi there. I hope you're doing great. My question is, what's the difference between resources and materials? Are you a teacher, Zahira? It sounds.
I assume you're talking about teaching, right? I think you had a question last week or the week before that was similarly specific to teaching, I think. That's a good question. In teaching, sometimes they refer to the same thing, resources and materials. I would say, so sometimes, again, they can mean something very specific, right? Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say a resource could be just a magazine article, or
could be anything.
Article, a YouTube video, an episode of Friends, something that you're using to teach or to learn.
Exactly.
Whereas I think materials are things that are specifically designed, specifically made for teaching.
So both of the times, if we're talking about teaching materials or teaching resources, sometimes we just mean the curriculum, right? The textbook, the teacher's guide, the worksheets, right? And that could be either. You could say teacher's resources or teacher's materials or class materials, class resources. And if you're talking about like the workbooks, the textbook, the teacher's guide, that's the same thing. But resources, like Colin said, can be anything. It can be movies that you're going to use. It can be songs you're going to play. It can be an activity that you've found on the internet that you're going to do. Materials can also mean physical things that you're going to use. Like if you're going to you're creating a poster, then your materials might be your poster board and your glue and your markers or photographs or magazines you're going to cut up, right? So resources can be anything, physical or intangible, like an idea, like an activity that you found on the internet. Whereas materials, in addition to meaning the actual book, can also mean physical things that you're going to use, like an actual magazine you're going to cut up, or things like that. So yeah, resources can be very broad, and it can be both physical and immaterial things, whereas materials are usually, unsurprisingly, material things, actual physical things. But if you're talking about the difference between teachers' resources and teachers' materials, that's usually the same thing.
Yeah.
Great. Interesting question.
Okay. Yeah. So a few people are saying hello, saying hi and hello. There's not sure how to pronounce that. Tony, do you know?
Oh, that's Vitali. Yeah.
Oh, Vitali. Yes. Hello, Vitali.
Yes, one of our regulars.
Yeah, Win Sang, we just answered. Oh no, we're about to answer your question, Win. And
we have Bassam as well. Said hello.
Yeah, and I don't know how to pronounce this, but hello.
I think that's Bassam. Let me know if I'm saying that correct, Bassam.
Okay. Can you read this one then, Tony?
I cannot read Sanskrit at all. I'm sorry. I have no idea. I can't help you with that.
Okay.
I wish, but I don't know any Sanskrit.
Yeah. Hello to you. So yes, Win, we got your question. You've just reposted it, but here we are. We're going to answer yours now. So, yeah. By the way, yeah. If we don't answer your question, we're just working our way down the list of questions. So we might skip ahead just to say hello to some people. But in terms of main questions, we just work our way down the list. So there's no need to keep reposting them. Any question we get in the next 10 minutes at least, we'll definitely get to. So. How can I get a good SAT more than 1,400 points? Now, I being in the UK, this is something I know nothing about, so I'm going to have to defer this to you, Tony.
So, for those of you who don't know, the SAT is a test that mainly high school students take in the United States and their scores are one of the things that help them, get into university. The maximum score is a 1,600, but it's divided up into parts. And so you can get 800 on each part. So that means because it's split into two parts, there's 3 or so ways to get a score of 1400. You could get a 700 in each, right? Or you could get an 800 in the math section and only a 600 in the English section, or the other way around, 600 in the math and 800 in the English. So it depends on how good your math is, right?
There's 800 points available in each part, but you only get a point of 400 in total, 1400.
1600
total.
total.
16.
So the question is, how would you get a 1400 out of 1600? Yeah.
Right.
That
makes sense.
So the question is, like, it depends on how good your math is. If you know you're going to get 100% and 800 on the math, then you only need to get a 600 on your English, right? So that said, again, I have literally taught entire courses on how to improve your SAT score. It's actually one of the first things that I used to teach way back in the day, is SAT prep. So, I mean, there are so many different things that I could say. Vocabulary is very important for the SAT, way more so than for actual, like, conversation. There's words that you use on the SAT. An example is when I was studying for my SAT forever ago, one of the words I learned and have known ever since is plaudits. Plaudits, which means praise, like people are telling you, good job, good job. I've never heard anyone say it other than when we're talking about that word. And I've only seen it written in like a magazine article, maybe twice in the 20 plus years it's been since then. It's a word no one uses. It's an incredibly useless word, right? But it's a word that is on the SAT. Right. So for the SAT, you have to study vocabulary for the English section that you would not normally ever use, which is really frustrating. The math part's not like that. All the math that's on the SAT is all really practical, really useful math. But the English part it's weird. And again, I could talk for hours, for weeks, about ways to improve your SAT score. But yeah, that's probably the biggest thing, is just focus on vocabulary way more than you would need to actually do that for learning English.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Well, good luck with your SAT exam, and hope you're successful in. Okay, let's see. Sonia says, what could you recommend to improve pronunciation? Well, so this is obviously a question we get quite a lot. And one thing that we always say is pronunciation is physical. This is why I have my big mouth up here to illustrate things. Because when we make sounds, we're using something in our mouth or in our throat, either our lips, our teeth, our tongue. That's how we make the sound. So it's good to be aware of that. Don't just try to think, okay, I need to make this sound. It needs to sound like that, because it may be a sound that you're not accustomed to using in your first language. So, and if that's the case, you may not know how to actually make that sound, or not be accustomed to physically doing what you need to do to make that sound. So that's my biggest tip for improving your pronunciation. Then I would also say, the International Phonetic Chart, or the International Phonetic Alphabet, is useful, because that breaks things down into all of the different individual sounds. So you can use that to try to identify which sounds it is that you're having problems with. And then you can study those sounds a bit better, and find the video that I've done a video on every different sound. So you can find the video relating to that one sound you're having problems with, and then think about, what is it physically that I'm doing wrong? So yeah, break it down and think about it physically. That's my biggest tips.
For sure.
Any
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I mean, again, if you know what sound is, usually it's certain sounds that people have trouble with, right? And if you do know what that is, then I always say, watch Colin's great videos on pronunciation. it's always helpful.
Okay, thank you for that, Sonia. Now, similar question next. Sir, how can I improve my English? Can you suggest some tips? Well, we've just suggested some tips for pronunciation.
Pronunciation, for sure.
Yeah.
And let us know what you want us to call you, because I can't read Sanskrit. I'm sorry. So let us know what you want us to call you, and we can do that.
Yeah. This is a very broad question, though. So we've just talked a little bit about pronunciation. Tony talked about vocabulary for the SATs. But I think at the end of the day, a lot of people are studying English to pass an exam or to get a certain score in an exam. But at the end of the day, people just want to be able to, well, on one hand, people want to be able to express themselves in English. That's what people want. But then at the same time, people do want to do that for a reason. Maybe it is to live abroad or just enjoy English language movies and music or whatever. So I think having in mind your long-term goal, it's one thing to say, okay, my goal is to get a 1400 in an SAT. Right. That's a bit. I don't think that isn't your real goal, though, is it?
No.
That's not your life's ambition to get a score in an SAT. That's a means to an end. You want that so you can go to a certain university, so that you can study a certain thing, so that you can become a certain thing. So think about what it is you want to become. What opportunity is it that English will give you to help you stay motivated, I suppose, is what I'm saying.
Yes. And even if it's something like you want to get into an English-speaking university somewhere in the world, right? Well, but why do you want to do that? Do you want to, are you hoping to be an engineer and have a career or things like that? Like there are more specific things. So find whatever it is you're interested in and read about that in English, or find an online forum where people are talking about that in English. Right? Whatever excites you is what's going to keep you motivated, right? So always try to find a way to actually explore doing the thing that you love to do in English. Yeah.
Yeah. So the same person also asked, sir, where are you from? So I'm from the UK, and I'm in the UK now. So I'm speaking British English. Tony, do you want to talk about your background?
I'm from the United States, but I live in Canada. Have lived here for years. So I'm the one representing North American English here.
Yeah.
I do want to say to Nadezhda, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but we are going to get to your question for sure.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, yeah. So same person's asked, what is the phonetic language? So you probably mean the phonetic alphabet, the International Phonetic Alphabet. So this is the symbols that you see representing all of the different sounds. So the problem with English is that it's not phonetic. The letter, if you think of the word women, it's spelt W-O-M-E-N. But we pronounce it we. So it's not consistent. So the vowel letter O can be pronounced O, I, lots of different ways. So so there's this alternative alphabet, which is the International Phonetic Alphabet, where each symbol does actually represent a sound and a specific physical way of making that sound. Mm-hmm. So and that's sort of what phonetics is all about. It's the study of actually producing sounds, and therefore it's useful for pronunciation.
Now, I want to answer another way to, if you mean what is a phonetic language. So a phonetic language, so like Colin was just saying, English is not a phonetic language because our language, the words aren't exactly as they're written. You can't just go by the letters in the word to know exactly how it's pronounced. But really, this is sort of it's a spectrum. Some languages are very phonetic, like Spanish or Korean. where if you see the word written, you know how it's pronounced. You can pronounce it, sound it out sound by sound. Some languages are completely non-phonetic, where there's no connection between the way you write a word and the way you pronounce it. There's different, like ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics, Chinese characters that are by meaning. Sometimes they're used by sound and sometimes they're used by meaning. It's different. So obviously different languages can be in between as well. So English is really kind of in between. There are lots of things in English that are just pronounced the same way they are written, but then there are lots of things that aren't quite. So English is actually sort of halfway in between a purely phonetic language like Spanish and a completely non-phonetic language.
Great. Okay, so I hope that's helpful. Let us know if that is. Let's see. Where did we get to in the questions? Yeah. So I want a good book for grammar and linking speech. So those are two very different things.
Yeah.
For grammar, the book that I like to use is called English Grammar in Use. I was just Googling it to see if I can remember the name of the author. 1 second. Raymond Murphy. English Grammar in Use by Raymond Murphy is a very good book for grammar. For linking speech, I'm not really sure.
I feel like that would be a difficult thing to have a book on.
Yeah, I mean, I found Wikipedia very useful for doing most of the studying I did into phonetics, and IPA and things. I'm sure there are good books out there, but unfortunately, I can't really recommend one. If anyone else has any recommendations, please put them in the chat. That'd be great. Okay, now Shaheen has another question here. I had to Google this one though quickly because how to pronounce Shmaltz and its meaning? Because I hadn't heard of that before, so I wanted to check it wasn't rude. Have you heard of that, Danny?
Yes. So I don't know off the top of my head what this means, but I do know that it's a Yiddish word. There's a lot of words in English that are Yiddish, and so just from the way it sounds, I'm going to guess it's something like. Well, no, you looked it up, right? So why don't you tell us what it is? Yeah,
it's a sort of rendered chicken or goose fat.
That would be the German, right? What is it in English? English or Yiddish?
In Jewish, it says. Jewish cuisine, used in Jewish cuisine. So it's a food product. It's an ingredient.
But as an English word, it means excessively sentimental.
Oh, right. So
Schmaltz in German means something like fat. I don't know exactly how to pronounce it, but it means something like fat or drippings or something like that. So I guess that's what it is saying. Something is excessively schmaltz or schmaltz means that it's like something that you eat it and it's rich, but it's too rich, right? So it's overly too rich or too sentimental.
But So it's got two different meanings. One in sort of food and also in describing emotions or sort of thing. Yeah. Okay.
Most Yiddish words in English are kind of slang or informal. They're not. You would never use that word in a formal setting, unless you were writing about.
I'm guessing Shaheen
Jewish
has
cooking.
seen this word written somewhere and or written or in a video or something, and they weren't quite sure what it meant. Let us know if that's the case, Shaheen. That'd be interesting to know. Okay. Another question here. So
this is Nadezhda.
Can reading help to speak better?
So I think this is a very interesting question. So what reading does not do is help your pronunciation, because when you read in English, you might learn a lot of words and not know how they are pronounced. You can tell this, a lot of native speakers, if you hear them use a word and they pronounce it wrong, because it's a sort of an uncommon word and they know what it means, they obviously are using it correctly, but they pronounce it wrong. We say that person has a reader's vocabulary, right? They know the word, but they don't know how to pronounce it. And so the question is, will reading help you speak better? That's an interesting one, because it won't help you pronounce the words better, but it will let you use the word correctly better. And so you could ask, well, which is more important, being able to pronounce a word correctly or use the word correctly? Which is better, to have fluent speech or to use correct grammar? Well, neither is really better than the other. They're both good, right?
And also they're both really dependent on the other.
They are, exactly. Reading can help you improve your grammar. You'll slowly, your brain just kind of eventually gets used to all the weird exceptions and things like that, and you just kind of use it without thinking. Reading will help expand your vocabulary, but so by itself, it will help a lot of things, but it's not going to by itself make you be able to speak flawlessly. So listening is also very useful, but listening still does not help your pronunciation as much as you would think. You have to actually say things because pronunciation is physical. You have to get your mouth used to saying things the correct way. So I think that, yes, reading absolutely can help you speak better, but not if you're just reading and doing nothing else. But if you do a lot of reading, especially, obviously in English, but you also listen to things in English and you also you practice, you talk to people in English a lot, that reading part will make a difference, yes. But by itself, it's not going to do it all by itself.
Yeah. So we've got a comment from Win Sang. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly. I'm not sure if I am, but they say, I think listening is a better way to speak better. In the sense that you're hearing the words modeled, so you're hearing the correct pronunciation modeled. So yes, that's true as well. But like Tony's saying, I think at the end of the day, the only thing you need to speak. If you're just listening and just reading, it's not really going to help you with your speaking and pronunciation. You do need.
It's not going to perfect it, right? You have to practice. You have to talk, because pronunciation is physical. Your brain has to get used to things like grammar and vocabulary and collocations, but your actual mouth and your lips and your tongue, your muscles have to get used to pronunciation. So speaking better is both of those things. Speaking the right words in the right way, but also pronouncing the sounds correctly. So you have to exercise your brain and your muscles to do both of those things. Yeah.
Okay, so we're getting to the end of the questions. We've got a comment here from Dario, who says, "Hi guys, cheers from Chile. I get to see your videos in my phonetics classes. That's great." So yeah, if you have any questions, please let us know. We've run out of questions, but there's always lots of things to talk about what we're doing. Go ahead, Tony.
Well, I was going to say, Basan was saying that he was looking for an advanced book on grammar and linking speech to study translation. So I don't think we are going to be the ones that are going to be able to help you out on that, largely because translation is very dependent on what two languages you're translating between. So it's a very specialized area. I've read some books on translation technique and grammar and linking speech, as part of that, but I certainly don't remember them to be able to recommend them to you.
That's difficult question. But thanks for asking though, and I hope you find something that is helpful for you.
For sure.
Let's see. So Dario's posted a comment about about speaking again. If you just listen to people, talk will not improve as much as if you were practicing and watching the vowels and consonants. Yeah. So watching how you pronounce the vowels and consonants, and that's like what we're saying. It's really important to get accustomed to those sounds. Every time you hear somebody making mistakes in pronunciation, it's always a physical thing, something that they're physically not doing right. And it really depends on your first language. The example I give is always the sort of sound, because you have to stick your tongue out a little bit. And a lot of people in a lot of languages are not accustomed to doing that. So just kind of moving the tongue in that way, it's not very. They're not accustomed to it. It's like not something that they can do. I mean, they can do it. It's just they don't. Their brain doesn't know how to tell their tongue to do that in this kind of subconscious way. So it's really important to kind of force yourself to do it so that your brain gets used to telling your mouth to do what it needs to do. Yeah, great. Let's see. Sonia says, consider you if there is much difference in pronunciation between American English and English from England or from the UK.
Though there is a difference between England English and Welsh English and Scottish English and Irish English, for sure.
And American English is not just one thing either. So
exactly. Well, I mean, even English in England is dozens of different accents, even if you were to talk about like Southern English, well, there's still dozen in the United States. The Southern accent, well, there's actually dozens of different accents. A Texas accent is not the same as a Cajun accent, and so on. Yeah.
But broadly speaking, they do fall into two categories: the sort of British English or American English.
And American English fits in, like Canadian English in pronunciation mostly follows the rules of pronunciation for American English, but it is a little different.
Yeah, in terms of some grammar and some of the vocabulary, it's closer to British English.
Yes, it is interesting. The spelling usually follows British English, but Canadian pronunciation usually follows American English. Yeah, so there are some differences in pronunciation, but it's important to realize the difference between pronunciation and accent, right? So one thing that we say is accent is what sounds go into a word. Pronunciation is how well you're making those sounds. So if I, for example, the word mother, right? The M sound, we're both pronouncing the M sound the same. Right. So the sound that's at the beginning of that word, mother, we're both pronouncing it the same. But the sound that comes at the end of the word, we're not pronouncing the same sound differently. We're not. We're pronouncing two different sounds, because the sound that word ends with in American English is the sound. But the sound that it ends with in British English is the
mother.
Right. So it's not that we're pronouncing the sound differently. The word uses different sounds, and that's the accent, is that the word uses different sounds. So if you spell that word mother in the IPA, it would have two different spellings in British and American English because the sounds that go into it are different. Right?
Yeah, in fact, a lot of dictionaries online as well as in books will have both the phonetic spelling in both British English and American English.
Definitely.
Yeah. There must be a dictionary that's sort of got, lots of different, because even like you were saying, in the UK, there's lots of different accents and lots of different ways of, and so you could write it in Cornish, Birmingham accent, Newcastle accent, Scottish from
Glasgow, Highlander, everything. Yeah. Shetland, Faroese, whatever.
Exactly.
And you take all of those UK accents, all of the dozens upon hundreds of US accents, but also, Newfoundland in Canada has a very distinctive accent. You could identify different accents within Canada, but then, South African accent. And I'm sure there's not just one South African accent. I'm sure there's several different English accents there. And then Australian is also probably many different ones, and so on. So you could probably make a dictionary that had hundreds of entries for each word in every possible different accent. And it's not just about like those are not different pronunciations of the sounds. Sometimes it will be, but usually it's just that there's different sounds that go into the word, right? So there is I wouldn't say there's a lot of difference between American and British English, but there are some very distinct differences. The two biggest are the R, the way R is pronounced at the end of a syllable, and the ah sound. There's a different ah in British English that isn't that doesn't really exist in American English.
Yeah, I think that's the biggest difference between British English and American English in a way, is that oh sound. So I would say the word not, and you would say
not.
So it's more like a ah. So I say oh, and you say ah.
Yes.
And I think that in actual fact, when you do an American version of the phonetic chart, it doesn't include that oh sound. It just doesn't come in. So if you want to sound British, perfect that oh sound and learn. And also the in as in mother, father, the schwa sound as people call it. So we've just had a question on the Discord from Shaheen, which is strange because I think Shaheen is watching on YouTube. I'm just trying to put it into the caption, but it's a bit too long. But let me read it. Let me read it from Discord. So I was following British sounds. British English drops the R sound, or it's pronounced in a different way. Because of this R sound, some people struggle to understand me. So I've decided to draw the R sound into my sound. What do you think about that?
That's interesting. The reality is there's lots of different ways that people all over the world pronounce R. There's a trilling r. There's like a growling and then of course there's and then there's right. So there's a lot of different ways to pronounce your R. So
and even in English we got that sort of r and
Yes, in British English there's both of those. Yeah, r and are pretty much the same, but the and the are very different. So one thing that people do a lot. So one thing to make sure is figure out how you make that sound in your own language. Does it have a sound, or does it have a r sound, a trilling sound, or that more throaty and make sure that you are being very intentional about which R sound you use. Some languages are going to have no problem picking up an English R sound, but others are going to have a lot of trouble, and you'll have to really practice that sound. So again, figure out what it is that you're doing with your mouth, and what do you need to do to make the English R sound, and just practice that sound. It's just like working out a muscle so you can do a certain so you could play a certain sport, right? You're playing football, you want to do a lot of running practice, right? Same thing.
Yeah, and if you want to do if you want to train for a particular sport, it's a physical thing, and after you've trained, if you're training for running, your legs will ache after a training session, or your arms will ache if it's something to do with your arms. And I think it's the same is true with pronunciation. After a session of practicing pronunciation, your mouth should hurt with the exercise that you've been giving it, in a good way, not a bad way. And because that when as you recover from that pain, it's not really pain, but you know what I mean.
Soreness.
You become. That is the process of becoming more accustomed to physically making those sounds.
Absolutely.
But what Shaheen was saying about I've decided to draw the sound into my sound. I'm not quite sure what you mean by that.
Do you mean breathing in like a? I mean, I don't know how you'd even make an R sound breathing in. I don't think you can. But one thing that people often do is they draw out their R's. Some people have noticed that the way they make themselves sound more American is by saying their R's longer. And so that might be what you're talking about. I've definitely heard that before. It's not something that as Americans we typically would do, like think about, I need to make my R sound long. It's just that an American R is often seen as longer than to people who speak other languages, right? So maybe if that works for you, then that makes a lot of sense, right?
Yeah. Okay, so we've got a few more questions in the chat now, so let's sort of move on. Just quickly, Shaheen on YouTube now. YouTube seems to be on Discord and YouTube at the same time. Do you use a hardcover dictionary these days? I don't.
Oh, and Nguyen asked, which is better, a books dictionary or a web dictionary? Okay.
So yeah, I mean, I use the website Collins Dictionary. I can give you, I mean, not because my name is Colin, just because I like that one. It just seems very, it does the job, I'll put it in the chat for you now. There we go. Did that go? There we go. Yeah, I use that one when I want to look up a phonetic spelling. I think it's got both American and British phonetic spelling, so that's good. In terms of which one's better, using something online or a book, I mean, well, it's normally easier to look something up on a website because you have it on your phone or whatever than it is to carry a big book around with you all the time. Some people might like using a book because it's tactile and the process of looking things up. Maybe you find other interesting words. Yeah, I think it depends on you, on what you prefer.
For sure.
Okay, now Susanta's here. So we've got a few questions from Susanta, which is great. And also hi to Jack. So yeah, who's just joined us. So yeah, first question from Susanta. First question from Susanta. What does characterize mean?
Oh, so the character of something, or its characteristics are, things about it, things that make it, like your characteristics are the things that make you you. Right. So characterize, I mean, it can mean a couple of different things too, is part of the problem. But so to characterize, let me think.
Well, I think it's important to say, so it's the verb form of character, but in the
characteristic, I think. It's the verb form of characteristic.
Okay, yeah. So it's the process of describing something's character, right?
Well, but so it's two things. It can either mean describing something's character, or it's like okay. So if you characterize something, right, you're describing it, right? So would you characterize him as an angry person, right? So you're saying, would you describe him as an angry person? But if something is characterizing itself, that means that it's, so like if, let me see, how would you say that? Or you would say that, he is characterized by his temper. Then that means that this is like a major important part of who that person is. Something that characterizes you, right, is something that kind of fits you into a large category. So it describes you, but in a really important way. So when you characterize something, you're just describing it. But if something is characterized, so you're using the passive, that means that that's something that's really important about that person, right? Yeah. So both ways, yeah, it's the verb of description, right? Describing something's, or verb of characteristic. So describing something's characteristics.
I'm just jumping ahead now, but still with Susanta, because now Susanta always asks us very good questions about vocabulary, and she just says that she likes the Collins Dictionary too because they present the definition in an organized way. So that's great. But yeah, it's not everyone's favorite. Someone else says, Wynne was saying that they like to use the Oxford Dictionary. So I think try a few ones and see what you prefer.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I quite like the Oxford Languages Dictionary because it gives you a little bit about the history of the word as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which can be useful for helping to remember it.
Yes.
Yeah. And remember what it means.
Exactly.
Okay, so Susanta says, what does swipe and dash interaction mean?
Now,
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure if this is what you say. This used to be used a lot, but I haven't heard it in like 10, 15 years. It used to be like when you had a credit card and you had to swipe the credit card. A lot of places would say they were swipe and dash. So you had to swipe the card and then you could leave. You didn't have to sign anything, right? And that's what swipe and dash meant like in the 90s or the early 2000s. I haven't heard this in forever, so maybe it means something else. Now, like that, sometimes they'll say like tap and go, which means the same thing, except you're using the tap interaction, like where you tap you just put your card down on the reader. And so some places they'll say tap and go, which means you don't have to do anything. You just carry your thing you're buying, you put your credit card or your debit card on the reader, and then you just walk on. They don't have to give you your receipt or ask you any questions or things like that. But the old version of that was swipe and dash. Don't know if that's still, I can't remember the last time I heard that phrase.
I just Googled it, and it does seem there's some sort of swipe and dash app on Google Play. It might be to do with payments. So I think, I think probably it's related something to do with payments and paying with a credit card, because of the action of doing something quickly, which is implied by the word swipe, and then dash, which means to sort of go quickly. So it's probably something to do with payments. Okay, another one from Susanna. Markets get saturated. What does saturated mean?
So saturated means that something is as full as it can be. So think of a sponge. A sponge can be dry, and then you can put it in some water, and it might have a little bit of water in it, but you could still go and sponge up more water. But once the sponge is completely full of water, you can't use it to sponge up any more water. It's saturated, right? Jack Darby gives the example of the atmosphere. So we wouldn't say the atmosphere is saturated with dew, but once the water vapor saturates the atmosphere, there's as much water vapor as the air can hold, then any new water vapor has to come out. And that's how dew is formed. The water vapor comes out of the air, right? You can, if you're trying to make a saltwater bath for something, you can only dissolve so much salt water or so much salt in water until the water is saturated. It's as full as it can get. So when a market is saturated, that means that some product, there's enough of it on the market that nobody needs any more. There's no need for any additional of that product. Right?
Yeah.
The market is as full of that product as it can get.
You mean of that type of product? So you've got you could say the breakfast cereal market is quite saturated, although there's hundreds of different types of breakfast cereal.
But also you could say it about a single product as well. So you could say the cinnamon crunchies market is saturated. Everyone who wants to buy that particular type of cereal has already bought it, right? There's no need to produce more of it, right? So you could use it for anything. You could say that the oil market is saturated. So like across many different products or many different types of products, you can use it for lots of things. You can even use it, just say the consumer market is saturated, or you say the consumer market is getting saturated, which means people have more things to buy than they have money to buy them with. So there's really no point in producing new products, right? Yeah. It can mean a lot of things, but that's what saturated means, is that it's as full as it can possibly be, that it can't get any fuller.
Speaking of full as it can possibly be, I think today's live stream is almost saturated.
Oh, yes. Yes, it is.
You get it. Well, it's not. I mean, we're running out of time, is what I mean. Maybe I'm not using.
But I think we only have one more question, unless there's a question on Facebook that I haven't seen.
No, I think that's it. So we just got one more question from Susanna, and then we will draw things to a close. So Haiti is the poorest nation in the Americas. Why did they use the word the Americas?
So the question is not just why did they use Americas, but why the Americas? And this is pretty common in English. If there's a set number of things, sometimes we refer to it as the and then the plural. So the Americas are North and South America, right? Or North America, South America, Central America, and the Caribbean. Either way, those are the Americas, right? That's just the name for the continents and land masses of the Western Hemisphere.
So why are they called the Americas? Was it a person?
Well, like where did the name America come from? Yeah, it was the map makers named it after Amerigo Vespucci, who is not the person who discovered them. They didn't name it Columbia. Amerigo Vespucci was just one explorer. I believe he is the person who explored the coast of Brazil. But he was just the one who was popular at the time that the maps started selling. It's largely an accident why it's called America instead of Colombia or something like that. Yeah.
Well, so one of the countries is Colombia.
So it's important, Susanta, that it's not the fact that the Americas is plural. It only works because we're saying the Americas, right? There are many Americas. It's not talking about the United States. It's not talking about the United States. It's talking about North America and South America. Those are two different things, not two parts of the same thing, right? So for instance, we wouldn't say the Americas when we're talking about the 50 different United States. We would say the states, right? And many people in North America and South America don't call the United States America because they also live in America. They call the United States the states, right? So if you were going to say India, right, you wouldn't say the Indias if you mean different parts of India. You would not say that. But if there was more than one India, right, and you were to talk about all of them, then you would say the Indias, right? So an example, using that, maybe the Indias would be a bad example because I can't think of a really clear, but for example, the Pakistans. Back when there was an East Pakistan and a West Pakistan, you could refer to those as the Pakistans, right? So in order for there to be, you would just say the Indias, right? It wouldn't be the different parts of India. There would have to be more than one separate thing that were both Indias, that were both India, to say, the Indias. So you wouldn't say the Indias, but you could say, I don't know, like the Bahamas, an example. There's lots of Bahama Islands, so they're called the Bahamas.
We talk about the West Indies. The
West Indies, right? Yeah, exactly. And you don't always do this. For example, I've never heard anyone say the Indonesias, even though Indonesia is also a collection of islands. So it's just sometimes these are used and they make sense. Sometimes they're not. Yeah.
I think the confusion, it comes down to the fact that people often talk about the United States as America, when actually America really
which is not.
All of North and South and Central America.
And that's why people say the Americas when they're specifically trying to refer to North and South America and the Caribbean and Central America, because otherwise, if they just say, Haiti is the poorest nation in America, people are going to be like, wait, Haiti is part of the United States? Because people are so confused between when someone says Native America, or not, sorry, I'm reading the question. When someone says America, they don't know if they mean United States or if they mean the continents of North and South America. So that's why the phrase the Americas has become so common, to make sure that people don't think you're just talking about the United States.
Yeah. Now, we did say that would be the last question, but Jack's has just put a question which kind of ties in with it. So I think
quick question, yeah.
Quickly answers. Why are Native Americans called Indians? India comes from the river Indus, right?
So it comes from the Indus River, I believe, right? Well, so there's actually, there's an easy answer and a slightly more complicated answer. So when Columbus landed on Santo Domingo or whatever, he thought that he had gotten to India because that's what he was trying to do, was trying to get to India. So he thought he was in India. So for years after, they were saying, we've talked to the Indians. And of course, they turned out to be wrong, and they just started calling everyone there the Indians, even though they knew they were not from India. But the more complicated question is, Indies, not meaning India, because again, most of the East Indies are not India. The East Indies are Indonesia and Malaysia and Guam, Okinawa, Taipei, those are all part of the East Indies. So because people thought of India in early English, we talked about India as being the place where really exotic, amazing things came from, and so the phrase Indies became just the word for tropical islands, and so that's why we have the East Indies and the West Indies. So Indies, even though the word originally came from India, actually doesn't have anything to do with India. Indies are just the word for tropical islands. So the East Indies are like Indonesia, Malaysia area, Philippines, and the West Indies are the Caribbean, right? So the places that spices came from, not because they were specifically connected to India. But the reason that Indians, again, got called that was because it was originally, they thought they were Indians. And after that, well, that was still the West Indies. So the people in the Caribbean, at least, it was correct to call them Indians because they were from the West Indies, right? But then why people in North America and South America also got called Indians just was habit by that time.
Yeah.
Everyone was used to it.
Okay, well, that's really interesting. Yeah, we've sort of gone off of the topic of English, but in a way, but it's good. It's always
for sure.
No, it's good to sort of know this kind of background and things. Because
bonus questions at the end.
Yeah. Great.
So
okay,
Win quickly asked, can you say the Vietnams? And yes, that is something I've heard people say. Back when there were two, they would say the Vietnams or the Koreas or the Chinas, but not as often. Whereas the phrase the Americas is very common, specifically to make sure there's no confusion when people just say America, whether they mean the Americas or the United States.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you everybody for watching. We've had a really good time. Thank you to Shaheen as well, especially for being on Discord and YouTube at the same time. Please do head on over to Discord if you haven't already. Be great to get some more questions on there ready for next week. We've also got Patreon. If you want to support us, you can head on over to Patreon and join up there. And but yeah, the most important thing is that you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and then you'll get notified when we next go live, which will probably be the same time.
Same time.
I'm pretty sure. Yeah, it's going to be the same time next week. Okay, so thank you for watching, everyone, and see you then. Bye bye.